This is the Stacking Days Podcast, the podcast about the healing experience of recovery for people of color by people of color. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. We suggest you seek out the support of a trained professional for guidance with your specific circumstance. I'm your host, Ray Donovan, and I've been alcohol-free since September 2021. Welcome to the show. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Stacking Days podcast. I'm actually really excited. I'm always excited about these conversations, but I'm really excited about the conversation today. We have a gentleman who is a dynamic individual, has interests, and plays in many different spaces. And we'll get into a little bit of that. But I've been following Tommie Runz for a while now on his journey, and also a lot of the pursuits that he's making in the world of running and fitness. And honestly, I've had my eye on him from even before we started Stacking Days podcast. So after a lot of kind of back and forth, we finally were able to work our schedules out together. So I want to introduce you guys to Tommie Runz, and he can kind of give us a sense of who he is and what he's up to.
All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate you inviting me to be on the show. And yeah, I don't know really where to start. This is, I'm used to talking about running. So Tommie Runz is not my real last name. It just happens to be like a decent Instagram name. So normally when I get on these things, I talk about running, and whenever people ask me where my running journey began, I always start with 2017 when I chose a life of sobriety. And then the running journey came along in 2018. So like alcohol had kind of like, if I just go through like the alcohol story, my battle with alcoholism, alcohol had like started, we got introduced to each other like when I was 17 years old. And alcohol had been around the family, obviously, like, not obviously, but people drank in the family. And I always knew that like the gentleman, my dad and my grandfather before me on my dad's side, it was always said that the Tom Baileys like to drink, and I don't know, like if I process that, like one day I'll be that too. But I feel like looking back, I feel like I kind of adopted some of it just because I think we're programmed too. Like I think some of us are more susceptible to addiction than others. And it doesn't take much to like fuel that fire. And so like one day, 2000, and when I was going to say 2017, in 2001, I think, or 2002 or something like that, a friend brought a couple drinks to school, high school, it was senior year. And then the moment that I had like that first drink and like felt that buzz or whatever it is, it was like the moment of like a freedom for me. 'Cause I had always had like this sense of like I didn't belong, or I wasn't, good enough in a space, or I was super worried about like what everybody else thought of me in every moment of anything, like anywhere I went. It was like, what are they looking at? Who's, do I look cool enough or whatever? And then for that moment, like that first moment, that was like one of the first moments in years at that point that I felt like I didn't care. I felt like free from like this thing that I created around myself. And so from that moment on, I was like, this is a thing for me, and it happened really quick too. Like I, within like, I don't know the timeline now, but at least I think maybe within 7 days of that first drink, it was like a pep rally day. And I ended up, long story short, I woke up on the bathroom floor with my mother, the principal, and the security, like the police liaison, standing over me because because I just went too crazy with whatever I was doing. And like you would think at that moment that like that would be like, oh, this isn't for you. But that wasn't the case. And I continued down that road for quite a long time, from 2001 or 2 until choosing sobriety in 2017. So we had a good run. It was cool and fun in the beginning, I think. And in the middle to end, which was a very long time to be in the middle to end of something, was just horrible. I mean, it was like I was struggling with the identity of in every aspect, and I never thought of like alcohol as being not a part of me, like, which was strange, like to look back to think that like I never really thought about like, let's just take this out and maybe I'll be better, you know, because that was who I was. That's how I identified. That's how I lived. That's how I like moved in spaces as who I thought that I wanted to be, you know?
Yeah.
And it just got really rough though at the end when I finally knew that I needed to try to figure something out with this relationship with alcohol. When I finally knew it, it feels like everything got worse, you know, from a mental health standpoint. Like the moment that I'd separated my identity or who I thought I could be maybe in alcohol, it got dark quick, depression quick, this like hopelessness thing because I knew that I needed to part, but I didn't know how. I didn't know, you know, I tried many different, you know, New Year's Eve resolutions.
Just like the hopelessness of it.
Yeah, because it was like, it was fine, you know, it's fine until, I mean, it's never fine, but it's like, it felt okay, I guess, when you just like, oh, this is who I am. And we're just going to try to toe this line of like not dying, you know, and like not, you know, do anything crazy. I was able to manage that for a long time. But then the moment that I knew that I needed to part from this thing, something in there was just, it just made it even life harder, you know, or to live the life that I was living, it made it harder because I couldn't stop, you know, like I would say, let's just go for, you know, a month or New Year's resolutions or, you know, multiple different times and moments, or like if you just went crazy one weekend or something, or one day or whatever, because it wasn't a weekend thing. You'd be like, okay, well, I'm gonna stop for like, you know, I'm just gonna give it a break during the week, no work days, all that stuff. I tried all the little things, you know, but I never was able.
All the moderation tools,
yeah, all that stuff. Like you know, like oh, if you just you know you don't drink during the work week, you're fine. You're just like everybody else. But I would never be able to make it until like it came to like the point where every time that I woke up, I felt like I was taking an L. You know, like every time I like just opened my eyes and realized that like I got to finish that drink sitting next to me on the, you know, on the nightstand or whatever. It was like a loss. It was a bad loss. It was like a blowout. You know, it was like, it wasn't just like, oh, darn. You know, it was like a deep sinking feeling that I'm never going to get out of this. And one day, like I just decided to start telling the truth. It was strange, you know, like, cause in addiction, lying is a thing. Like that's like first nature. I was going to say second nature. That's first nature. Like you, as an alcoholic or an addict or anything, the lying is a part of everything. So like my mom called and was just like, how are you doing? Random, you know?
This really quick pause. Like, did your mom know? Was she kind of angling at something or was that just a regular mom's check-in?
No, I mean, she knew that I drank a lot. I don't think anybody had like an idea, like, I know people, like all alcoholics and addicts, no one knows how much I was, you know, like, I think that everybody had some people close enough had a very good feeling that like, you know, I had a strong relationship with alcohol, but from the outside looking in, I mean, I was functioning. Like the problem with being a functional alcoholic or a functioning addict is that in your mind, everyone sees the good. You know, everybody sees that you're paying the bills and you're doing well at your job and you're getting promotions and all this other stuff, but they don't know you're like dying inside, you know? But like, so I think my mom knew that I drank a lot, but I was never the type that was like rambunctious or loud or, you know, outwardly like drunk, you know, like I was very like chill and try to be low and just enjoy that thing that I was enjoying and that detachment from maybe self a little bit. So I was never like the one they'd be like, oh, wow, he's really, you know, that wasn't me. Like I was able to just kind of coast like an all day thing and just figure it out. So I think she sensed things, but also a mom. So she's just like, how are you doing? How's my son? I think she said. And I was like, yeah, not so good, you know, and immediately I'm like, crap. Now I got to explain what that means, you know, and then she's like asking me, you know, what's going on. And I was like, you know, the drinking thing, a little, you know, I'm drinking a little bit more than I used to. Like, and, you know, you start lying again, tell the truth, and then start lying again a little bit to cover it up. And then I tried to blame some of it on like my wife, like, yeah, you know, I don't think we're really doing all that great. And then my mom's like, well, employee assistance program is a good thing. You know, like most jobs have it. I'm sure your company does. You call, it's like not anonymous, but like you call, they hook you up with a therapist or whatever. So I did that, and I decided to tell the truth again. How many times, like how much do you drink a week? How many drinks? And I was like, well, at least 5 or 6 a day of something, whatever's around. And I just said just like that. And she's like, oh, okay. And then so we go through that thing. And then the lady paired me up with a therapist who was a family counselor to disguise like the whole, like I'm upset with my wife thing. And then, but also, specialized in addiction. So the day that I went to go see her was January 11th, 2017. And so I drank at 11, like the last drink I had was like 11:50 something the night before. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to drink the day of going to see this person to talk about this thing. So I'll stop. I won't drink, past 12 o'clock, which is a weird bargain. You can't go smelling like alcohol. That was the thing, actually. It was less like admirable than I just said. So I go there and I decided to tell the truth, third time to try to tell the truth again. And so I'm going through all this stuff. I'm doing like my alcoholism, like addict, like manipulation thing, and I'm like just spinning this thing. Cause like, that's the thing. Like, to me, like addicts and alcoholics are like master manipulators, at least we think we are, but we've been getting out of things for a long time. So like I was just doing that. She saw right through like everything, and she's like, okay, cool. I'd like to meet your wife, but also I'm not going to call you one, but I think you might have very strong alcoholic tendencies. And I'd love to send you to a meeting with someone that also comes here. He goes to a meeting on Sunday. It's a nice place. You should go. And I said, sure, I'll go. And so I decided I wasn't going to drink from that day until at least that Sunday. It was a Wednesday to Sunday. I think it was like something like that. Wednesday or Thursday to Sunday. And I'm like, I can do that. I can figure that. I can, maybe if I just stay sober and go to this, I don't want to drink in between that. Like I want to be able to at least say that. It was really vain. It was like, yeah, like I want to at least say that like I went here and now I'm here and I'm still sober. Right. So I ended up going there, and just to, for someone listening that's new to this or hasn't started like their journey yet, or maybe he's not even an alcoholic at all, and they're just listening because it's a dope, podcast. It's like at that point, 5 days hadn't happened for me in years.
That's huge.
Like in trying to do it, like I think the week or two, since it was January, the week or two before that, like whatever New Year's resolution thing it was, I was going to not drink for 30 days. And I got to day 3. I got to January 3rd in the middle of the night and just woke up and then just went crazy, So like just a week later, I was able to span like this 4 days. And I didn't put that together until recently on a podcast about running, that the moment that the truth was the thing for me.
Yeah, I that's what really came through when you were talking about that, and also it's just the truth, right? It's kind of the first kind of truth, the second truth, the third truth, and just continuing to lean into that, irrespective of how uncomfortable that truth may be. And it didn't even sound like you were so sure that it was going to work out for you, but it sounded like you were very sure that was the tactic that you needed to take because everything else just hadn't been working for you. And I feel you on that because like there's a lot of freedom that comes with truth, and sometimes truth is hard, right? It's hard to kind of step into, and it definitely sounds as though that's resonated for you. I was going to ask you really quickly, over your relationship with alcohol, at what point in time did you kind of recognize that it was an issue for you though, even though it was your identity and that's kind of how you rolled, but at what point in time before 2007 did you realize that, this is an issue, but I can still kind of manage it and I can still put on a good face through this thing that I'm struggling with, but I am struggling with this thing. I'm just curious if had it always kind of been something that was, that up until a certain point, it no longer was working for you.
Well, it was 2017. You said 7. I wish it was a good 16. That'd be cool. One day at a time. It was, so I don't know when that happened. Like I looking back, there was a bunch of different moments where like that's when it was too much. Like that's when it was too much. You knew it then, but in the moment, I don't think that I placed it in the right spot. Yeah, it's really strange though, because like it's hard to for me. Like I mean, some people may have like an exact answer on that, but for me, it's like there was so many. Because looking back and after you're clear, your mind's much more clear about these moments. I don't know how I didn't see that it was an issue.
Right.
I mean, it was to the point where like there's one point where I went out. I mean, there's so many irrational things that you do, like that. Just looking back, it's like, how did you not,
How did it not
like,
click?
what do they say? Like, most humans like go to protect themselves at least. Like, so I knew that there was an issue. I mean, if I had to say a time, I guess I would say maybe 2014 was like when it was like, you need to not be like, something needs to happen, whether it's a huge slowdown. It was never like the alcohol is going to be gone, because I mean, who does that? Like, what are you going to be, without alcohol? Like, who are you? So like, obviously you can't do that. That's not really an option, but we have to figure out this dynamic, because like, I woke up one time, like in the street park, like with my foot on the brake in neutral in a street, like, sleep, and you would think that would be a moment where like, wow, this is getting to be too much. But I'm like, oh no, it's probably just like the blood pressure medicine that I was taking. I was very much like the truth thing. I wasn't telling the truth at all to me either. It wasn't like I was like some mastermind. It was like I was dumb too.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned earlier that the degree of manipulation, like outwardly, I feel like there's also a huge degree of like inward manipulation that takes place as well. I mean, we conveniently forget what had happened, the night before, sometimes, right?
Yeah, my mom told me this story about my dad. Like he would, he'd probably like, he'd go like out or whatever and he'd drink and stuff. And then like the next day he'd be eating and he'd say like, I don't know what no, in the morning, he'd be like, I don't know what was in the dinner last night. Like, I just don't feel good. She's like, and he was serious though. It wasn't like he was like trying to like, be silly or whatever. He would be like trying to put the hangover on like the food on the spaghetti.
Right.
And, so yeah, I guess I fell like right in line with the old man. And the
That's
thing is like, so like some of my backstory too, like that I think is like as appropriate for some of this is like my dad passed when I was 8. He was 39 years old, died of a stroke. I'm not sure where he was in his journey with alcohol or his relationship, but I do know he drank, and I know my grandfather did as well. And so like this whole time, like while I was doing these things, like I was getting closer and closer to this age that he was, like felt like I was following in this like really dark, like in these dark footsteps of like, this is a guy who died at 39 years old, wasn't, overweight or anything. I mean, if you saw him like, the day before, you'd be like, it's a healthy guy, So like all signs were like pointing towards, you can figure this out, man. And until like 2017, things just weren't dire enough, or things just weren't where they needed to be for me to be able to make that decision. And I'm so like eternally thankful that nothing happened, before it was too late for me to be able to make that change on my own, because like they say, people end up in the rooms for like, like for like law, the lady or something, or sickness, you know what I'm saying? Like that. So, yeah. So was it the law, the lady, or love, or something like that?
I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, like people say like probably law, love, or like something. Like the only reason why people stop, not only, but big reason why people stop is because they get in trouble. They have an ultimatum from their like spouse, or like they get sick and the doctor's like, you're gonna be out of here.
Yeah, those are pretty compelling reasons to get in there. But I'm glad that you were able to kind of walk in and on your own volition. Let's move forward a little bit. So you walk into the rooms. What was that experience like for you? I mean, that's not part of my journey. So, I mean, I did at one point in time, walk into a room, and it was only it was a short visit, and I didn't walk back in. And so I'm curious, what was that experience like for you? And what were kind of those early days, in your sobriety journey like for you? What are some of the tools that you used, maybe that were part of the program, but even some external tools? Because I think that ultimately it sounds that that's kind of what led you to it, like in large part what you're up to today.
Yeah.
So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what that bridge looks like.
Yeah. So when I walked into that room, like day 4 or whatever of sobriety, it sounds funny to say now, but because you have so much to learn about sobriety and life at like 4 days in. I walked into a room that is in just outside of Detroit. It's a city called West Bloomfield, and West Bloomfield is a very well-off city. So I walk into this room. I park the car. I'm seeing all these nice cars outside. I walk in, and it's like middle-aged to older, mostly white folks. That looked like, some of them looked like they had money, some of them looked like they didn't. But it definitely was a room that was 100% not going to work for me. No way. I can't relate to anybody in here, So I was like, okay, sit down. Even the guy that she had me meet with, and I'm like, he's a nice guy, but like at the moment, I'm like, this isn't my show. You know what I mean? Yeah. I need somebody that's been through what I've been through. Talks like how I talk. And first share, they go around the room, they're sharing or whatever. First share, person just like literally says something that I was thinking last week. Next one. Everyone told parts of my story somehow, some way in their own journey just by sharing on a random Sunday. And it wasn't like, let's perform for the new guy. Let's start from the beginning. It was just random topic, but they said and conveyed like all my feelings before it even got to me. And at that moment, that's when I knew. I was like, okay, these are my people, and I'm going to keep coming back and figuring out like some of these people had 20 years, some of these people had 15 years, 5, a year, whatever. And at that point, somebody saying 6 months to me was wild. So I was like, well, I'm just going to keep coming back. And then I added like another, I was going to 2 meetings like a week for quite some time, probably, from like 2017 almost all the way up to COVID, when they started like closing down, the meetings. They did it on like Zoom and stuff. But I learned like some of the there's just the knowledge of folks in the rooms to hear what a lot of them say and do and think, and try to figure out how they go about their days to be able to stack days, because you when you're sitting next to somebody and you're like 30 days in, and like the guy sitting next to you, lady sitting next to you is like 20 years. It's like, it's a hard thing to hear. It's like, I don't even understand what you mean by 20 years, like sober. Yeah. Like you just like, you don't like how, like, I don't understand. But then that same person will humbly say like, it's just one day at a time. And it sounds stupid until you really think about like, and that, so to answer your question before I go on this big thing, like one day at a time is one of the tools that was huge for me, like right up front, because I had to go. I traveled for work, and when you travel for work, it's a drink fest at these conferences and stuff. So I was very worried. Like 2 weeks in, I was super worried about 1 or 1.5 months later, And they just said to me, "It's like, yo, you can't. That's it. One day at a time. You can't worry about that. Like that's not even a thing for you. Today is the only thing you can control. Do this thing today. Go to sleep sober, and then wake up." And then just do it again. Like that's all you can do. And then you'll get there, and then you'll figure out how to work that through. But that, and then control what you can control, which was in the serenity prayer, which is, God grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Like that whole thing to me is like, that's that moment where you realize that all you can control. And this was huge for me, like in sobriety and life and all that. All you can control is you in this moment. Like not just like, oh, you only control yourself. You can only control you right now. You can't control you 10 minutes later. You can't control you a year later. All you can do is like, is do the best thing for, you at this moment. So control what you can control one day at a time. And then somebody told me that you have to do it for you. Yeah. You can't go into sobriety or anything that's going to that seems larger than you, or seems like this task or this thing that is almost impossible in your mind to grapple with, but it's going to be a huge undertaking. You can't do things like that for someone else. Like they can be a part of your why, all that. But what I heard in some of those moments when I was going through some issues that I would share was like, you got to do this for you, man. Like, that's it. You can want to be the best version of you, the highest, most good version of you. And in every day you wake up and pursue that selfish, like air quotes, selfish goal. But then let's just say if you're married or you're dating and you have kids or you have a dog or you have a job, if you go after this selfish journey of like being the highest vibration version of you, everything and everyone around you benefits from that.
Totally.
And if someone says like, what's most important to you on lists of things, and I learned in those rooms too, sobriety is number one. Not my kids, not my wife, not my job, not money, not whatever. Sobriety is number one, because if I didn't have sobriety, there would be no running. There would be kids still probably, but I wouldn't be who I am for them. Nothing would work with that. Like, I wouldn't even probably be here at this point. I mean, because there's no way, like I don't know. So the point is like, it's, those tools that I learned was one day at a time, control what you can control, do this thing for you. All those things, no matter if you take away the alcoholism or whatever, you can put those lessons that I've learned on anything, which is what I do.
Yeah.
Running, whatever it is. And everybody, like the issues that, like, when I talk to my kids, like, I don't say like, I don't whip out the big book on them or whatever. But like, I teach my kids the lessons that I've learned since 2017. Like, I don't teach them stuff that I, did back in the day or whatever, like stuff that I thought I learned. I teach them like, you can't worry about what everyone else is doing. All you can control is what you got going on right now, and do that best thing for you, and everything outside of that. Cause there's some people that stop hanging with me because I maybe didn't tell me they did, but we're not as close as we were, from when I stopped drinking, and when I started running, because that was the next version of the next thing that I felt like I wanted to do for me. And there's just been things that just didn't work out because of the choices that I had to make for me. But you can't live your life based on anything else outside of like this single moment of you.
Yeah. It's you're now 5 years and change, 6 years.
Yeah.
2017. Yes. 2023. I'm just kind of blown away by, how, through it's unique when you have a disorder, an addiction, whatever you want to call it, and you can come through that. There's a degree of learning that comes with that healing that I just don't even know if it's attainable otherwise in life. You know what I mean? Like, you think about like the lessons that you've learned in the rooms. Granted, you learn in the rooms, that's been your journey, but those are such fundamental lessons that now that you can pass on to your kids and you can live your life by. I just think it's a great, you had to go through a lot to get there. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of pain that comes with that road to get there, which I think in turn just kind of makes it that much more kind of nourishing when you've gotten to that place. Like people use the word recovery and sobriety. I don't know, sometimes they use it interchangeably, but I've been thinking about it more along the lines of healing, you know what I mean? Like really, truly, healing, both like physically. I mean, that's the, the kind of like residual of the whole thing, but that mental healing and that, that spiritual healing that comes along with kind of being on that path. I mean, I love hearing that, especially when it comes to you, doing it for yourself first, but ultimately what you're able to then pass on to your children, through your own experiences. Is like quite literally one of those moments where you are positioned so that your children don't have to live the same, reality that you did, and, you can hopefully guide them. I want to get into the running, but before we do, I want to talk a little bit about like family. I want to talk a little bit about, how it's enabled you to be the father that you ultimately, knew that you were capable of being. And I think, and then also the type of, husband that you are. It sounds like you're still married to your wife who had been with you, over the course of your journey. So I'm sure that she's probably been having to go through her own degree of healing as well. So I'm just curious how that has been for you as you are also trying to kind of, close these kind of wounds for yourself.
Yeah. So for the kids part, it's like, I don't know. I mean, so they're 15 and 12 right now. So, I mean, they were 9 and 6 when I stopped drinking. So I don't know, like, I don't know how much they remember of that. But I feel like, I heard this, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ed Milet.
Mm-hmm.
So Ed, I was listening to this thing he said, because his dad was an alcoholic. And he said that one thing that hit him was that some person somewhere that helped his dad when his dad was lowest and he walked into those rooms. Someone gave him something and told him, passed some knowledge on to him that then in turn changed Ed. And Ed, the reason why he is who he is now is because he speaks a lot about some of the tenets, like, of the sobriety, the sober journey, or AA, some of the lessons that his dad passed on to him. And he wouldn't be who he is today without his dad having gone through the things that he went through. So his dad had to be broken to be able to hear something, to be able to pass to his son. But then the even bigger thing was that someone super unqualified, and the only way they were qualified is that they were extremely broken at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So they had something that they could now, kind of like what you said, like kind of take these like weird life lessons and these tough life lessons and boil it down to something so simple that like an alcoholic can hold on to, pass it to someone else, and then that in turn changes their life. So I try my best to just talk to my kids as open and honest as possible. And I don't think that I would have been able to do so without getting honest, like, I guess, with myself and learning how to communicate about my journey in like in an appropriate, helpful, fashion or manner. So I think that the lessons that I teach my kids are that of, I don't have the credentials to teach them how to be successful people from, an early age, because I didn't do that. But I do have the experience to be able to speak to them directly and surely, like aware of like where this could take you, because I mean, hats off to all the parents that don't have to deal with that don't have like the past that I've had. But I know that looking back when I was 16, if someone said some of the things that I'll say to my daughter and son, someone said those things, I'd be like, I mean, act like I didn't hear it, but I heard it, because I know that this person is true. And I don't even know how to answer that question really, but like, I just feel like I'm a more true and open person than I would have been prior, because I would have had to cast something onto them that maybe I didn't have. I would have had to teach them lessons that I've heard and maybe think is the best thing to say.
No, I mean, it makes sense. And I also, again, hear that, that truthfulness and that honesty come through. I know, one of the issues that I've, witnessed from, previous generations is that they're maybe not as open and as vulnerable as we are more prone to be this day and age, for whatever reason, whether it be cultural, whether it be societal kind of constraints. And I think that when you're moving through that journey of like having to become honest with yourself, having to become become more vulnerable, it puts you in a space where you can have those conversations, with your children much more freely, as opposed to constantly feeling like you're like, white knuckling, the navigation around, how are you growing these people? And how much do you want to share of your experience, versus how much do you want to keep from them? So I hear you 100% on that.
Yeah. I mean, cause I just feel like, cause my mom was great, but I think that there's this thing that is like, the more you've gone through and the more mistakes that you've made and you were able to get through them and without like this, these big, consequences, you can just speak from a place that is just no one can deny that you're being true.
Mm-hmm.
And like one thing that kids can feel and sense is that real feeling, like kids may not know that you're lying to them, but they don't trust it. And I mean, I think that kids are much more pure. I mean, obviously the older they get more, weird and stuff, like teenagers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, kids can tell, like, especially around like this, that early teenage years, they can tell when you're being real with them, and they can tell that you're speaking the truth, your truth, not just a random truth that like the teacher will tell them too,
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that my vulnerability shows up for them in moments when they see something happening that reminds them of something that I said, like, cause those are the moments, like those, like, I think that, alcoholics have, I think alcoholism comes from inside. Like, I don't think it's just like a random, like you took a sip one day and you loved it and then you just went down. I think we all like are preset to something like disorder, whatever, disease or whatever. Right. I think we all have a thing, and some of us are more susceptible to these things than others. But it's like the outside that, to me, that set me in a direction that like opened the door for me to say like, this is your option. Like it was all the happenings to dad, and then the type of people maybe I was around that I just felt inadequate around, maybe because of my dad passing or something. Like all these things happen, and I want them to walk into these different situations and see something for exactly what it is. Because I didn't see that the people that I really cared about in high school that were like, that made me feel super inadequate, I didn't see and know that those people are probably nice people or whatever, no shade to anybody else, but I shouldn't care about them, not in that sense, not like, because in 20 years, who knows where they'll be, because they have a different, goal in life than you. I want them to walk into rooms and just be able to spot things for like what they truly are, because I didn't have that. I wasn't equipped with that. I don't think. I think my mom tried, but I don't know if she saw and knew what I was going to have to see. And I've seen a lot of stuff. So hopefully my kids will be like, oh no, I'm getting out of here. That's not the right guy. That's not the right guy. That's not the right girl. That's not the right person, because my dad maybe was that at one point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, equipping them to be self-sufficient, in those moments where there's a crossroad, and just like understanding that, there are always going to be a few different paths that you can take, but you've given them a line of sight, at least down what a couple of those paths may look like, right? So they're empowered to kind of make those decisions, to move in the right direction for themselves. I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Like I told my daughter, I was like, I'm like, oh, that's like something she was saying to me. I'm like, oh, he's not the guy. That's not it. Not because like he seemed like a bad guy, but it's just something that the energy he was giving her made her. She didn't say it made her feel about a certain way, but I could almost sense that it made her feel, potentially made her feel a little less than where she was kind of doubting something. And I was like, then that's not it, because someone that doubted and walked through everything with doubt and everything with like insecurity, that probably led me to needing to like fill the gap with this alcohol. That's not it for you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why, not because I don't like him or whatever. And I could joke and say, I'm going to go beat him up, all that stuff. But the point is, like, this kid, for whatever reason, he's in his own lane. He's doing his own thing. But you just don't need to be in that lane doing that thing with him,
Yeah. That's
but then stuff, like on the marriage side, I was like, one thing that I needed, I think that I needed to know, and had to slowly figure out is that some of the reasons why we drink or choose a drug, or our shortcomings or whatever you want to call it, don't just go away when you stop drinking. Like that's what the point of like 12 steps is. It's not to go do these things and then be sober forever. It's to address, for some reason I can't find the words right now, but it's to address the issues and lacks and whatever's wrong with you that may be broken in the reason why you pursue this drug or this drink. Right. and to make amends and bring things out and really do a real soul searching, moment. And it's supposed to go on forever. It's not a one time thing. Like, you don't go through 12 steps and then just go, okay, I'm cured forever. Like, you learn these ways to analyze yourself and analyze people and situations, and like learn how to work through to the point where you can approach these situations as like a clean, like hearted individual, and know kind of where what you're bringing to the table, or maybe even what you're not bringing to the table. And I was so caught up in like fixing the alcoholism thing, and then like trying to get better at everything, because I felt like I lost a lot of time with alcohol, and I felt like closer I got to 39 that I'm running out of time, but I didn't, to be honest, I didn't address a lot of the things that caused me to need alcohol, or caused me to make decisions while drinking alcohol that hurt, my family, So this is just like extreme, like vulnerability in the moment. But it's like, I think people just need to hear that there's, like there's moments where you got to realize that like taking away a substance doesn't make you not that person anymore. Like, you have to address the reasons why you are hurt and what's going on. Because for me to drink as much as I did and get so close to like, to maybe seeing the other side of like what death looks like, possibly many different times. Why did I make those decisions that put me into harm's way so many times? And if I can do that to me, just imagine like the lack of care that I could have for someone that loves me too, So as I've like gone down this sober road, I deal with, you have to address old things, new things, and work through everything that like comes out in these like moments of like growth. Because the more you grow, the more you have to. The only way to grow is to address things that have happened in the past that you're growing from. And those moments suck, and they're terrible. I
was going to say, the more you grow, the more you have to come to terms with.
Yeah.
Right?
And because it's like, and the bad part about getting sober is like, no, that's not me no more. Like that's not what I do. Yeah. That's old, but you're still the same. I mean, just because you put the drink down doesn't mean that you've healed, and you won't go make a similar decision that hurt people before, or made you, or got you fired from a job, or whatever, or caused you to, like, drinking and driving versus texting and driving. Like, you still have to figure out why you're putting yourself in harm's way.
Yeah, I hear you. We haven't even talked about this, but I mean, I want to talk about like the tools that you use today to kind of keep you on that path. And no pun intended, considering you're a long distance runner. But yeah. Let's talk a little. I mean, talk a little bit about that, and we'll wrap up here shortly. But I do want to hear a little bit like how fitness and that journey has kind of complemented a lot of kind of the inner work that you've been doing in over the last 6 years.
Yeah. So, I'll just running, like, 'cause a lot of people go, oh, running saved your life. No, sobriety saved my life. Like that's just straight up. Like, there's no way around that, because there would be no running without it. But running seemed to me to I jumped like right into running. You'll often hear me say that I use some of the cool things I learned about being non-alcoholic, like that I'm super diligent, and I'll just keep going no matter what. Like it was kind of a joke a little bit, but like to be able to look like darkness in the face and just keep going. Everybody around you is like, yo, this is not a good idea. Your body's telling you, I feel like crap. Your brain is all crazy, but you're stuck, and you just keep going. You're dedicated to that lonely, dark road. Running and a lot of things in life that are tough and challenging have that same, you need that same, like fortitude to be able to just continue. And so running actually ended up to me being like this physical version, a very physical version of like the sober walk. So like the whole one day at a time, the whole one step at a time, 1 mile at a time, control what you can control. All that to me that I've learned in these rooms and then learned from being an alcoholic, I can use today, like in running. So while I'm out there and I run 6 days a week now, and I definitely use my whole, like, you know, alcoholic tendencies to just jump right in and go crazy. Right. It gets me to the, I suffered for so long, you know, in my alcoholic life and journey. But this suffering, when it comes to running, because it is suffering. Marathons are terrible no matter how you slice it. Whether you're fit or unfit, they're just still 26.2 miles.
It's rough on the body and the mind, I'm sure. You know.
It's just rough on the body. I mean, it's extreme. There will be a point that your body and your mind both say, this is ridiculous. And then there's something else that just decide, like, you just go, well, I guess I'll just keep going, you know, whatever, you know? And that's but it's on my terms, you know. It's this strange, like, how to get closer to that suffering feeling for me, because that there's some comfort there for me, I think.
That's an interesting insight, by the way.
But it's suffering for a gain, you know, like, because, you know, you suffer for 15 years in this, there's nothing to be had there. There's nothing good at the end of, you know, a long night of drinking. I mean, not really, you know. But then, like, it go through these marathon training blocks, or you go through these runs, you get up, and I've never felt worse or wished, oh, dang, I shouldn't have done that run, or I shouldn't have done that race, or I shouldn't have trained for this marathon. Every time that I do it, you get real close to that line of, like, this is terrible, I hate it, you know, everything about it. But in the end, it always works out in this benefit of, like, I learned something about myself. I learned that I can continue. You know, even when all signs are pointing to stop, I know that I can do this. So, like, sometimes I'll say, like, you can do this too. If I can't, like, that's the first time I put the two together. If I can do this alcoholic thing that I did and looked dead in the face of all those moments that were terrible, like, and I felt at my lowest, where I could have suicidal thoughts, all these things. If I could do that, I mean, I surely can train for a marathon. No, I surely can start a podcast. Oh, and I surely can raise these kids. Like, I can do this too. You know, like, I think that's one of my biggest things, like, to my kids and to other people too, is, like, we are the same person that did these other things. You know, like, you know, there's so many cases where we conquer something that at one point we thought was impossible or thought was unrealistic. And then we go into a new thing that's maybe just a different part of life or something, and we act like we don't know what to do. And sobriety to running showed me that I can do this too. You just have to just take the lessons that you've learned in anything, and then just place them in this new spot. You know, if I thought that 1 month was impossible, like, I mean, actually impossible, and I'm 1 year, 2 years, 6 years sober, I can do this too. You just have to be able to take those things that you learned and just place them properly in this new thing, and then just go. And normally it works out. Like, I mean, when does it not work out? I guess if you look at it the right way and take the things that you learned and put them in the right spots, you can do that too.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, you know, if you kind of just look at the full kind of spectrum, it's a matter of, you know, life being a series of doing a lot of really difficult things. You know, if you're going to have a successful life, you know, and granted, you know, you want to be able to gain from some of those hard experiences, right? Especially when we all know you can kind of go the other way, but a life, you know, worth living is definitely a life filled with, you know, doing hard things, I feel like.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hats off to you, man.
Yeah, no, I think it's struggle. I mean, struggle it sounds really grim. And I guess I had a question for you too. Like, do you like, and because you kind of alluded to it earlier when you were talking about how some of the lessons that we're able to talk about or life things that we can address, we had to have gone through what we went through to be able to, like, see it or process it in a way that can be used in this greater scheme of things. And I had this like weird thought for it kind of comes and goes or whatever. And I'm like, it sounds like depression, but I don't think it is. Like, do you feel that like because of some of the things that like maybe we've seen or felt or been through, or the deep dark moments that you have, I kind of feel like I'm at a spot where it's okay if I'm not happy, you know, or like inherently joyful. Like as some people are, you just walk through them and you can just tell like their default setting is like happy. And I think that for a long time, like I wanted to be happy, and I wanted to like look and sound and feel like this thing that like that you see on TV where people just like naturally have these great lives or whatever. And maybe if I act like that, then I'll have like this life. But I think that led me to drinking too, is to try to be more like this thing. So now that I'm farther away from it, I feel like I'm okay with and starting to settle into maybe some of us aren't necessarily designed to be happy. Some of us are meant to be a little different and communicate in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, I hear where you're coming from. And I think that when I hear that, there's a few different things. I think one, when you've had an opportunity to experience a lot in life, obviously life is fleeting, right? But when you've had an opportunity to experience a lot in life, I do think that, even in those darkest moments, you've had an opportunity to really, really experience what life has to offer. So it almost kind of brings you in closer and opens you up to that full spectrum of which happiness happens to be on, right? And I think that, what I've come to is less so about trying to pursue happiness, so to speak, but more so about trying to identify some of the other big emotions that have been troubling for me in the past, right? Like trying to identify and address heartbreak has been, something that I've, focused on more so than trying to focus on happiness, because I think that when you can start like lending, light and shedding light on some of those darker moments, then your baseline, by virtue of that, should be able to elevate. You know what I mean? And then I think that the other side of that is like what actually is like true. What is happiness? Like what actually is happiness? Is happiness someone walking around with a bubbly, disposition and and portraying a profile, or is it an inwards degree of like fulfillment
and peace?
And peace, right? And I think like that's something that's worth pursuing versus kind of the aesthetic definition of what a lot of people regard happiness to be.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. I think, because I think serenity, like peace and serenity aesthetically look different than like happy and joyful,
Totally.
And I think that maybe like that realization, not that I'm like looking to be sad, but I think that realization that not all of us, we all have our own, characteristics about it. Like some people just have a different disposition, no matter what they're going through, than I will ever have. And I think that's that realization this far into my journey, it just makes it a little easier to be like myself, because I think a lot of like addicts and alcoholics there's an issue. There's like a disconnect there with like being yourself. Is being yourself good enough? Because there's a moment where you think something is wrong with who you are. Like it's not enough. It's not this enough. It's not that enough. So this thing helps me get there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that if I was a little more aware that not all of us have to fall into like this bucket or we're broke or broken, then I think it would lead to just happier and more peaceful lifestyles if people were okay with just like, I don't need to be that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's definitely, a degree of comfort that comes with finding whatever contentment looks like for you and pursuing that. And again, it may not necessarily mean that you're just kind of this, you're running around and, you're over the top, quite a quote unquote happy. But you can still be really fulfilled in your life and accomplish a lot of the things that you want to accomplish. And I don't think that is synonymous with like being a depressed person, right? I think I think those are two different, very different things. but that is an interesting conversation, to have. I think that, and I'd be curious, once, folks get an opportunity to listen to this, how they would chime in, on that topic, right? Whether you are, have come out of an addiction, or whether you've never experienced that at all. I think that's probably like a question that a lot of people have to ask themselves. We oftentimes, as human beings, plug all of these gaps thinking that it's going to get us to this place of quote unquote happiness. But is that just kind of like this imaginary pie in the sky that, just to your point, may just not ever really actually exist depending on who you are as a person?
Yeah. And I just think it can be dangerous, if you just take it to like teenagers, or when you're trying to find out who you are, and you're building, like you're trying to build your character, and that's why like kids will do weird stuff the other kids are doing, because they're trying to fit into something and try to figure out, who am I? And then if the perception of like who a cool kid is this thing, or who like is going to be successful in life, you got to be this. That's where it's just like that gap gets bigger. In some people, the gap of like where they think they are and where they need to be successful or happy or just liked, by others. The bigger that gap is, the scarier it can get for people, unless they're okay with realizing that there is a crazy spectrum. And even on the people that you think that are just way up there, they may be closer to you. They may actually be closer to who you are than what you think, and they may be going through their own things as well. I don't know. I guess, it is. I think that's like a topic that falls into like the mental health bucket as well, because it's your perception of other people's things and lives and stuff is dangerous, because that, like what they say, like the thief, comparison is the thief of joy, and I guess I wouldn't say joy either, but I would just say like comparison is like is the thief of contentment, and just being like, oh, I like who I am. This is cool. I'm all right with it. So
yeah. That's a journey in itself, though, right? Like coming to the realization of self and who that authentic self is. And again, I mean, for better or for worse, when you talk about, exiting, an addiction, you're forced to have those conversations with yourself, and you're forced to have those conversations out loud and trying to identify, who are you as a person? You talked about it earlier, like literally peeling back the layers of the onion, and like, yeah, you've been able to remove, the drink from your life, but you got to kind of get into all these other nooks and crannies of like what makes you you. And then ultimately, how does that you kind of exist in this very complicated world that we're all trying to navigate, right? But look, I want to close this out. I got a couple of questions that I want to finish up with, that I like to kind of throw out to close out our conversation. So one's a softball, one's maybe not so much of a softball. So I'll give you the not so much of a softball question first. Okay. So we talk a little bit about mental health. We're constantly seeing examples of, folks who look like us gone too soon, stemming from, issues with mental health and their struggles. So like the first question that I ask a lot of folks is, in kind of those darker days for you, how would someone from the outside looking in, or maybe even those who are closer to you, have known that you were having an issue, or you had a problem, or you were struggling, without you telling them explicitly?
Oh man. Yeah, that was a hard one. I guess I would have to just look, because I don't know, because I didn't know how to catch those moments. I wasn't even scared enough to like really like pull the alarm, until it was like really like odd and strange, and I was like, it was very evident that something wasn't right, and I just needed that help. But I guess what I can say, because I don't really know the answer to that question, I don't think, but I would say that if someone in your life you suspect possibly, that they have issues, mental health issues, drinking, drugs, whatever it is, just giving them the opportunity to possibly tell you the truth, I think is I know this is not even the close to the answer that you're looking for, but
there's really no right or wrong answer. I think it's just like, it falls on the spectrum, I think, for everybody.
And I think it's like that. It's really tough for people that care about you to talk to you without sounding like they're worried and sounding like they're judging, because someone that has pulled back from has like pulled back within themselves, like
Mm-hmm.
to drink, to drug, to, in depression or whatever it is, has pulled back for a reason. So any advances towards that is a slippery slope, like it can make that person go farther into the reason why they started this in the first place. So I would just say, like, if there is someone that's in your life that's like that, just trying to organically give this person ways or reasons or an olive branch to just be able to start telling you like a small truth about something,
Yeah.
Because my mom asked me that question about how's my son 77,000 times before that. You know what I mean? But it just was that one moment that she said a thing, and then she was ready to help. That's another thing too. You just got to be ready to help that person. And, and there was no judgment in her saying to call these people. There was no anything other than like, oh, I know this thing, and maybe want to try that. It might be cool, But yeah, just be ready to help and just give that person like an option to start that truth like train, because it can get rolling, and it's actually pretty free.
Cool. I appreciate that. Last question. For someone who is, on the spectrum of, sober curious, maybe identify they got they're struggling, they need to make some changes, but they don't necessarily know what the first step could look like for them. What would you suggest to that person in kind of stepping into a new direction?
I can only, to me, it's, I never tell anybody to go to meetings unless they ask me like how I did it. Mm-hmm. So I'll just say like how I found this path was by going into a meeting, but I was ready to hear though, like I thought that, even like I said earlier, I thought I was going to go in that room and not be able to hear because they were all different than me, but I was still open and ready to hear because I walked in willingly and just, what else is there to try? So like, right. if you're sober curious, or you know that like I got to make a change because of health or whatever reasons, just take a step that gets you outside of the thing that you're doing, because some of those small steps that we do as alcoholics and trying to like, tiptoe around making a little change and like doing those little moderation tools and stuff like that, they just bide time and stretch out, instead of getting after it this month and trying to do something new and drastic now, those moderation tools could stretch us into 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later. And who knows what can happen in 6 months into 2 years. So I would just say, if you are curious about it, you're curious about it for a reason. So I would just say, just jump in there and try something that's scary, different, uncomfortable, because, to me, in my walk with alcohol, that room and that uncomfort was much less than the uncomfort and darkness that I felt in my like throes of alcoholism.
Yeah. I can empathize with that for sure. Tommie, I really appreciate it. I mean, as for those who are listening, you can obviously, gather that, Tommie is a very dynamic individual. And I want you to be able to find him out there in the world. Tommie, where can folks find you at today? To learn and follow you in all of your amazing journeys.
They can find me on Instagram as at Tommie Runz, TOMMIE_RUNZ. Website. I mean, there's everything is there. I have a website too. It's just TommieRunz.com. But that's more like for the running stuff, if you want to like work with me or whatever. But I try my best to like be myself in every moment and share some of the things that I've learned. I'm not like heavy on like preaching about alcoholism or sobriety. But I am very vulnerable when it comes to certain things. If I feel like a moment where I want to talk about a blessed moment or something that was life-changing for me and something that's on my heart, I'm going to share it. So hopefully if you like rock with the vibe, come on over and watch me run some miles, I guess,
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy it. I think that, you're an example of, living a fulfilled life. I mean, I think you describe yourself as a content creator or a digital creator.
You got to put I wish I didn't have to put a title on it because it's
weird.
I
know. But but look, what you put out there is it's beautiful. It's well done, and I think that it's just a lens that, that is refreshing. So I think that folks, whether you run or not, you're definitely worth checking out. So look, man, I appreciate you being on the podcast. Definitely look forward to staying in contact and following your journey as well. Thanks a lot, man, for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, man. Hopefully it was good.
Thank you for listening to the Stacking Days podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, email me at rdg@stackingdays.com or follow us on Instagram at Stacking Days. If you like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, and by all means, share it with a friend who you think needs to be invited into the conversation. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.